That's a problem. It seems I'm out of slip, so let's make up a new batch. And luckily I have a lot of reclaim. These are the pieces I trim off from my molds. So this here was the top of a pot, this here is a handle, and I have a bucket full of these. I just throw the excess pieces in here and let them dry out to bone dry. So I got this bucket, and this one as well. This should be more than enough to make up a new batch of slip. For a while I was trying to separate out all of the slip with colorants in it. You might not be able to tell, but this is slightly pinkish. And my bucket here has a pink tone to it as well, and that's from iron oxide as well as a few other colorants like some mason stains or whatever. So as I mentioned, I tried to keep this separate for a while and I gave up. So I just go ahead and throw all of my reclaim, even if it's just the regular clay, back into the buckets. So I kind of have a mystery color, but it winds up firing an off-whitish color, which works fine for my process. If you want, you can be more careful about separating around colors. It just requires having more buckets around. And hi, I'm Kent. Let's go ahead and make a new batch of slip out of my reclaim. As I mentioned, all this clay here started as slip. So while it is bone dry, it's also had deflocculant added to it at one point. That means that we only need to add water to rehydrate it, and we might need to add a little bit more deflocculant to it. I use Darvan 7 since it's very tolerant to how much is put in. And basically let it slake down, mix it several different times, and we should have a new batch of slip ready to go. This might be too much slip to fit in my bucket, we'll see. And you'll notice I have two buckets here. This one here has just my regular virgin clay and slip. So it is a porcelain-like clay body, and this is the one that's had colorants in it, and this is one that's empty. You'll notice I have two different spigots here. This is so I can pour the slip out very easily. Under here there's a motorcycle jack that lets me raise and lower things very easily. I have another video on that, and you'll see it in action here in a little bit. The problem with this spigot here was that it clogged up a little bit, so I got a larger one. And when I bought this one, I got a second, this one here. So while this bucket's empty, let's go ahead and swap this out so that I can pour out the slip more easily. To do that, I'm gonna go ahead and wash my bucket out. All right, there we go, mostly clean. Just wanna get out anything that really settled in the bottom. We're gonna be putting the reclaim back in here, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Let me go ahead and take this off. All right, there we go. And as you can see, there's all sorts of clay stuck in there. That's the problem with the smaller one. I think these spigots work great. You just need a big enough diameter, or you need to use your slip often enough that doesn't go ahead and solidify in there. Next, I need a hole big enough for this one. There we go. I don't want to go down anymore because then the ring here would interfere with the bottom of the bucket. So we'll snip this out. And I found a pair of side cutters worked reasonably well for this. All right, I think that's big enough. Rather a little bit tight. Let's go ahead and thread this in. All right, that's in all the way. And last time I had a few problems with it leaking, so I'm gonna put on some Teflon tape. Just like this, and this is reverse threaded, so make sure you put the tape on the right way. Of which I did it just backwards. So let's swap that around. You want the tape to be threaded on tighter as you put the nut on. Oh yeah, I just had it, it was getting looser. All right, there we go, there's the ring. And then we have this part here. goes in like that. I'll put some tape on this as well. All right, before I snug this up, I want to make sure that this ring here isn't leaking. So let me go fill the bucket up with water, and we'll be back. All right, and there we go. The spigot's on. It wasn't leaking. Doing it the second time was definitely easier now that I know what I'm doing. Two tricks. One, use the Teflon tape for sure. And the second one is there's this rubber gasket thingy. Make sure that's on the inside. If you don't do that, you'll have a hard time with leaks. And last time I wound up using silicone this all together. That wound up working, but it was less than ideal. So next up, we need to figure out how much clay and water we need to mix up the slip. So on one of my buckets, I went ahead and wrote up the recipe so I don't forget. And that's this bucket here. So normally I have a 25-pound bag of clay, which is 11.34 kilograms of clay. I want 30% water to 70% clay, so that winds up being 4.86 kilograms. I doubt we're gonna have 11.34 kilograms of clay since this is just our reclaim, so let's see how much we have. So here's the bigger bucket. And on that, this bucket weighs 1 kilogram empty. So if we take off the 1 kilogram of the bucket, we'll know how much clay we have. So here's my big scale. Let's go ahead and measure out our clay. All right, we're basically right at 14 kilograms with the bucket, so 13 kilograms without. So let's do the math. So we have 13 kilograms of clay by dry weight, and we want that to be 70%. So divide by 0.7. So that'll be our total weight of the slip. And we subtract off the 13 kilograms of clay again. So we need 5.6 liters of water. I'm going to go ahead and put it in our slip bucket. That way we don't need to move things around. And I want to put the water in first so that we don't have any dry pockets on the bottom. So let's see if I can tear this out. All right, there's 2 and change. Oh, a little bit more. Oh wow, right on the dot, 5.6. However, you notice that isn't exactly the number I calculated. This isn't rocket science, it's just clay, so try and get it as close as you can. All right, so we'll set this off to the side. And we're done with our scale for now. So for water, got a first bucket of clay. If we use all this up, I will go ahead and add the second bucket, but I don't want to have too much in there. I'm going to take the water and set up on my sand on the side here, so I don't have to worry about lugging this bucket around. That's what it's for. Now I'm just going to start taking clay and putting it in there. Be careful of dust. If you wind up kicking a bunch of dust up, you definitely want to use your mask. You can break this all up. It will make the rehydration process faster. I haven't found it to be much of an issue. And you can hear all the clay sucking in the water, which is a fun sound. So I'm going to go ahead and move a bunch of this over, and then I will dump the rest out. Empty bucket. Here's the water hydrated in clay. It doesn't look like we have nearly enough water, but that is perfectly normal. I'll push this down a little bit. And I can just see our water level poking up here. All right, so I'm going to let that bubble away for a while, and then once it's hydrated the bottom, I'll try and push the top back down and basically get it all wet. This will take a few days to fully hydrate between letting it slake, hydrate, mix, over and over again. You could probably make it faster if you really needed to, but I have several days before I actually need to use this clay, which is why I'm doing it now. One other thing to note is I don't have any throwing clay mixed in here. This is all trimmings from slip casting. If you had a little bit of throwing clay in there, it'd probably be fine, but throwing clay and slip casting clay, the formulations are different. So you probably do want to keep your throwing clay separate. If it was like 50-50, then I'd worry a little bit more. A little bit here and there, probably not a problem. And there we go. It's already starting to hydrate. Let's get everything submerged. And it looks like I have plenty of space, so I think I'm going to go ahead and put the other bucket of reclaim in. Okay, do you remember the math? We want 70% clay, 30% water. So we have 5.4 kilograms bucket plus clay. That means we have 4.4 kilograms of clay. 4.4 divided by 0.7. That'll be our total minus the 4.4. So we need 1.9 kilograms more of water. There are other ways to do this math. This is the way I remember to do it, so feel free to do whatever works best for you. All right, that's a little over 2, but we have the bucket itself, so I'm gonna call that close enough. So let's dump this water in, and then we'll dump in the rest of my reclaim. There's the water. A failed pot. And there we go, a second empty bucket. Yay, that's awesome, all my reclaim. There we go, everything is submerged, so that way it can hydrate. I'll go ahead and put the lid on this. And I'll let that hiss away. I might come back later tonight or tomorrow and we'll go ahead and give it a first mixing up. Meantime, I will do my cleanup. Great, all set for later. This is something I was horrible at doing in my previous studio. I'm gonna try and do better in this one. The slip's been sitting overnight, let's check it. I had just poked it a couple of times to make sure everything was underwater, and it is. And now I can feel the clay has kind of settled towards the bottom, but it feels rather plastic, which is good. No big chunks that are hard. Let's go ahead and give it an initial mix. Got my drill here. There's still some chunks in here for sure, but it is loosening up. Yep, starting to look a lot more like slip. All right, I'll probably do that on and off again a few more times. Basically just want to make sure that any clumps of clay get broken up so they can fully hydrate. One more day, let's check the slip out. Just feeling around the bottom to see if I have any chunks, and it doesn't feel like it. So let's go ahead and give it a mix. All right, that looks pretty good. The consistency seems about right. One way to check your slip is to measure the specific gravity. Basically, this is the density relative to water. Since we started with bone dry clay and added the water, we know exactly how much water is in there. I don't know exactly how much deflocculant's in there, but since this is really moving around in a nice fluid way, basically like cream, I think we're in good shape. So the slip should be fully hydrated now. Let's go ahead and try it out in a pot. I think we'll go ahead and make a bowl. I have this form up on the Shapecast website if you want to make it yourself. All All right, this is the bucket with our reclaim. So we're going to put slip into this mold here. And I want to go ahead and strain the slip. I've got this sieve here. Basically, it's a cheap kitchen sieve. I was doing a workshop not too long ago for a woman in my studio and basically teaching her how to make molds. And she noted there was lots of kitchen utensils in my pottery studio, and that is indeed the case. There are lots of things that I've managed to repurpose for slip casting. This is one of them. So what we want to do is filter the slip, and so this isn't quite tall enough. And if I had a taller mold, like this one here, it definitely wouldn't fit. And that's where the orange jack stand underneath comes into play. We can raise it up as much as we need. And in this case, we don't need too much space. I'm only going to do this bowl. I'm not going to do this mold right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and open this up, let the slip throw through, catch any chunkies, since this is reclaim in particular. There might be stuff that settled into the buckets, and fill up the mold. Slip is nice and fluid. It's coming out fast. I could open this more, but I don't need to. All the way up into the slip well. Again, this is something Shapecast makes for you. There we go, just like that. And I do have a little bit of sediment that was caught. I think I was experimenting with granular rutile, so that's probably actually what's in there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and go through the normal slip casting process. I'll let this sit for 20-25 minutes, drain it out, let it sit for a while longer so it firms up, and then we'll demold it. The plaster has absorbed water out of the slip, forming our pot. Let's go ahead and dump it out. And now we need to go ahead and flip it over so it can finish draining. Just like that. And we'll give it a little while longer so the clay can firm up. We should be ready to demold this. First, I like trimming the top. And I'll often do this on the banding wheel just to make it easier. So to get this part here where it's spilled over, I usually just use a plastic rib. And then a blade. Basically go down at an angle until you hit the slip well shelf. Follow it around. This comes off. So the cycle starts again. Let's go ahead and put this in the bucket, fill it up, let them all dry out, and we'll do it again. Eventually, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and put fresh clay in there as well, especially if you cycle through a lot of reclaim. And based upon my mold and my timing, it should be time to demold as well. So I have a piece of cardboard here to help catch. That way it doesn't deform as it falls this little bit. It comes out just like that. I'll go ahead and put this on a wear board. Now I want it upside down, so I should do another flip. So a smaller piece of cardboard here, big enough for the foot. Take it off, my wear board here, flip it around. So there we have it, one new pot out of a reclaim. The process is reasonably straightforward. It's basically the same as mixing up slip from dry clay. So my slip I actually buy dry and then add water just like I showed you, the 70-30 ratio. Only I then add the darban as the deflocculant. I didn't need the darban since it's already in the slip. And if the consistency was wrong, it wasn't nice and cream-like, when I mixed it up, I would have added a little bit more darban, but it wasn't needed. So even if you are buying your slip pre-made, which I recommend for beginners, you can go ahead and use this method to rehydrate it. Basically take all your trimmings, let them go bone dry, and you want them bone dry so you know how much water you need to add. If they're still kind of wet, then you're probably adding too much water. Measure everything out, let it slick down, mix it up, and you're good to go. Now I have a bunch of new slip that I can use to make pots, which is good, because I'm actually running a workshop and I need that for all the people coming. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.